Awesome. Connor, it's great to have you with me today, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to chat with you. I've really enjoyed the book, and excited to go deeper into it. And one thing that I've said even multiple times now, I've quoted you multiple times, and just a few talks I've given in the last couple of weeks or a couple of months since I started the book. This is a quote I want to begin with, and it's a quote I believe that comes from your dad. And you said that he used to frequently say that God feeds the birds, but he doesn't put the food in the nest. And I want to kind of start there because I think it really is a good jumping off point to this issue that I've seen with a lot of, especially young Catholic men, but I think it's young Catholics in general that tend to over spiritualize God's providence, and I think really underestimate our role in cooperating with the things that God wants us to do in life. And so, just want to start there with that quote: "God feeds the birds, but He doesn't put the food in the nest." What does that mean to you, and how do you kind of combat the temptation, I'm sure at times, to not do all these things, not be this intentional with life, and just trust in God kind of vaguely?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you zoned in on that. Of course, my dad, we're a good Southern family, a bunch of Southern boys, and so he says it to kind of say it the way he says it. He says, "Son, God will feed the birds of the air, but He don't put the food in the nest." So it's kind of that little redneck twang there. Um, and what he means is that you have to pray like everything depends on God, but work like everything depends on you. And uh, I think particularly our Southern culture, it's a rural culture. There's a blue collar culture, and in fact, the next book I'm working on right now is called "How to Raise Blue Collar Kids in a White Collar World." And so it's actually very pertinent that you ask this question because I think that kind of a blue collar mindset has a respect for nature and that you have to work, you have to give blood, sweat, and tears to get things done, all the while understanding that God is controlling the natural universe in which you live. But we live in an age where people are spoiled rotten. It's kind of a white collar mindset everywhere. And we're raising kids that are, not just spoiled, but they have a sense of entitlement. They fall into victimization, all of those kinds of things. And so I think what happens is that even in the Catholic sphere, we kind of feel that, well, if we just pray as a family, if we just have the devotions, if we just pray our family rosary, and as the CEO of TAN, I mean, I make my living selling devotions, and that's what we do.
Yeah.
But so I'm not diminishing prayer, but we cannot just think that we're going to pray our way into having great kids. Yeah, you got to pray for them, but you have to pay attention to the natural order of things, not just the supernatural order of things. And I think the sacramental life, the prayer life, the devotional life, the lives with the saints and the angels, and all the wonderful things that are absolutely true. It's kind of that supernatural life, right? But I think a lot of times people are so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. It's another saying my dad had: so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. And I think that I've spent my career selling tan stuff, and Well Ordered Family, Nathan, is my attempt to show God builds upon nature, grace builds upon nature, as Thomas Aquinas says. Grace perfects nature. So if you want to be a truly virtuous man or woman, you have to first perfect those natural virtues. You have to be well ordered. This is why they call it religious orders, is because there's a rhythm to their life. There's a structure to their day. They're doing work and they're saying their prayers and they're paying their bills, or they're taking care of, sick people, or whatever their job is. They take care of the natural order very, very well. And the supernatural grace then has a way to spill over it like a tsunami. And I think families miss this. I think families, because mom and dad are worn out, they're tired, what we end up doing, especially the more and more kids you have, and if you're a devout Catholic, you say, well, we go to the Latin Mass and we pray rosary and we all have our patron saints and we got the saints hanging on the wall, and it gives them a false sense of security, because God still expects us to get out there each and every day and work hard within the natural order, within the natural law. And so only then will grace truly flow like he preordains it to. So I think that's kind of the philosophical or theological explanation of what my dad always meant when he said, he'll feed the birds of the air, but he don't put the food in the nest. You got to go out and get it.
I love it. I think it's so fun to think about such a simple statement, from the blue collar mindset that has so much packed into it. And I love what you said there about the concept of devotionals. The way that I just verbalized this or explained this last, 5 days ago, not even 4 days ago, to high school students. I spoke at a local Catholic high school here in Denver and was sharing with the kids on anxiety. And I said that I think one of the biggest things, because everything you just said about entitlement, I think also is part of the reason why we have this breeding of anxiety, or this uptick in anxiety and depression among so many young people. But I think that the way that I kind of described it to them is I said that one of the big things for my life when I overcame so much anxiety that I had when I was younger, which I think a lot of times stemmed from the broken family relationship, not, having structure, not having order to my family life, not even knowing, my dad being in and out of my life during middle school years and things like that, which was so critical. But I said that the other thing is I said that a lot of times Catholics, we go through the motions, as you were saying. We put up the saints, we go to Mass on Sunday, people pray the rosary every day or whatever they might do as their kind of daily devotional. But I said a lot of times our hearts aren't surrendered to God. And if we don't have our hearts surrendered to God, meaning that whatever God throws our way or whatever God wants us to go through, we're willing to go through. And was, tying into them with my Army experience of like Ranger school is the biggest thing for me with that, or airborne school. And I had to jump out of planes. I'm like, why does God have me do all this? And now I see, and I got to see the impacts on my nature and my masculinity, especially my leadership, that I was going through this formational time, even though so much of the suffering seemed arbitrary. But I think that the other side of that is within that surrender. Not only is it being surrendered to the suffering or the losses that you might take, but also am I actually surrendered to God wants me to do this work. God wants me to put in the work and be more intentional. God wants me to put in more effort to recognize that, yes, he wants to feed me. He wants to feed and provide for my family and whatever he wants us to do, whatever our mission is that he'll provide for us. But am I actually surrendered to saying, okay, I don't feel like doing this, but I'm going to actively try to do it anyways.
No, I love it. I got to tell you that, I'm pulling something down here. I don't know if you knew this, but the other book I'm doing a lot of promotional stuff on right now is my next book, just released on 10 books. You have only one problem. Experience the instant reward of trustful surrender. So the whole point of this, it's really a modern take on the great Tan book, Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence. It's a little book that's like one of the best Tan books out there. And the reason I say we have one problem, Nathan, you're going to love this. You see, I think that we list our sufferings as problems. Like we have financial problems, we have family problems, we have marriage problems, we have employment problems, we got a problem neighbor, we have health problems, whatever it is. We list these things as problems. But saints usually look back on those sufferings and say, yeah, those were sufferings. But they weren't really problems. They were actually blessings in disguise. And they weren't necessarily supposed to be solved. They were supposed to be lived and suffered through. So I say, the only real problem that we have, no matter what evil we have to endure from other people, we suffer injustice all the time. No matter how many sufferings we have one and only one problem. And that is whether we have 100% surrendered to divine providence. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing that has to change. If you haven't surrendered completely, you have to do it. And when you do that when you solve that one problem, as opposed to 100 problems, you solve the one problem of trustful surrender, then the financial issue and the health issue and the relationship issues, those aren't problems anymore. They're blessings that hurt like hell sometimes.
Right.
But they are prescriptions written by the divine physician for your own spiritual healing. That's the only reason God allows you to suffer these things, is because he thinks it may help in your salvation. And so we need to learn to see sufferings all around us in every phase of our life. But there's only one problem, and that is I haven't surrendered to God's divine providence completely. And when I have, all the other little problems become sufferings, and they don't necessarily have to be solved. They become mysteries to be lived.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I really was also sharing with them too how I think God really, increases your capacity to love, your capacity to suffer as you go through those things if you are surrendered to him. And how, yeah, just increasing the virtue of patience alone is huge in that. We were talking about St. Francis de Sales before we started, and he really
Yeah.
impacted me big in that way. A question that I wanted to ask you before we get into the six components of well-ordered life is, you mentioned, I love the kind of combination, and I'm excited for the next book on blue collar kids or blue collar values in a white collar world, because I think it
Yeah.
is a real challenge that we have, coming up from somebody who I saw myself. I used to be out like literally in the mud, be out at, 6:30 a.m. every day in the cold, whether it was raining, whatever. And we're doing PT and getting to it. And I've even seen myself and how I've gotten softer in working now at a desk, doing Zoom calls with people and just handling emails instead of, carrying rounds, on ruck marches and doing the things that I used to do. So, with that, I want to just talk about kind of motivation and just kind of your drive, because I think that there's obviously such a drive to work ethic and such a underlying or fundamental value, I think, in the blue collar world to having a strong work ethic. Question I get asked a lot of times when I talk about seeking excellence and I present this kind of way of life, of approaching life with intentionality, ownership, and courage in the 7 pillars is, how do you stay motivated to do all these things? And, for you have 15 children, you have all these, you're running multiple companies, you're, getting after it in all these different ways of life. But how do you stay motivated to, one, just begin to get started, I guess, when you were kind of kicking things off, or when you're getting out of bed every morning, but then 2, to stay committed to this process or the structure of life that you've created?
That's a tough one, man. I do a lot of interviews, man. I think I've done 60 interviews now on welder family, and I haven't been asked what motivates me. So I don't have an answer. I wish we could hit pause and let me go meditate for an hour and come back, but we won't. I'll it's funny, Nathan. Somebody asked me the other day, and this sounds like I'm bragging, God, and I don't mean to make it sound like that, but somebody asked me the other day, he said, Conor, how in the world did you become so disciplined? And then he started like rattling off stuff that I've done. And it's somewhat of a similar question to what you're asking, but I looked at him with like furrowed brow and I'm like, disciplined me? Are you kidding? And and it was it wasn't false humility. I might have that in other areas of my life, but I don't feel like a disciplined person. But I mean, I do recognize objectively, you start looking out over the things that we've gotten done. And by the way, it's 16 kids now. 16. And 2 grandkids, which is kind of cool.
That is.
But
presumably more to come.
Yeah. And so you start looking at these things, if somebody, and I could do a 10-hour episode with you on my imperfections. Okay. But how do you stay in shape? How do you keep a prayer life? How do you keep your businesses going? How do you provide what your spouse needs each and every day? How do you be a good father? How do you have passion projects like writing the books and things I do? I don't have a great answer. I guess this is what I would say to people striving for excellence. I learned a long time ago that stress is an engineering word. It comes from engineering. Okay. And think of a bridge, okay, that has a bunch of cars on it, and that creates stress. And we only adopted the word stress for psychology purposes, fairly recently. In fact, if you read some of Dale Carnegie's books, they didn't have the word stress. This is like in the 20s. They didn't have the word stress in the 20s. They had worry. They said worry. One of his books was called How to Stop Worrying. Well, he meant what we mean as stress. So I learned, Nathan, that stress in an engineering term is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be solved. Stress can always be solved by one of 2 ways, and only one of 2 ways. One, you can remove weight off the top of the bridge. You can pick up cars and take them off. That relieves stress. Or 2, what would be next? What do you think?
Strengthen the bridge.
You strengthen the bridge. You put more support underneath the bridge. And then you can pack on more and more and more cars. And at a certain point, it gets stressed out again, and you got to put more support underneath it. So when I learned that, I ever since then, I have really been thinking about areas of my life where do I have to offload stressful things, and where do I need to add more support? And so I don't deal with stress nearly like I used to. And I mean, God, I feel like I'm doing like a little commercial, but this was a book that came out about 6 months ago. You are never too busy, because I get sick and tired of people saying, "Oh, you're staying busy." You're standing outside of church and people say, "Oh, what's going on?" "I don't know, just staying busy."
Yeah.
And they all use this phrase, "staying busy," as a badge of honor. Oh, I
Yeah.
see. So you're really important because you're super busy, right? I get it. Okay, your kids play travel soccer and baseball, and you and your wife go on these vacations. You're involved on 87 committees around town. You're super busy. I get it. Okay, your people will talk to my people, and maybe if I'm lucky, I can have breakfast with you someday because you're so busy. And that kind of mindset started really driving me crazy. So one day, as a joke, I told people, and I usually do this when I'm doing promotion on that book there, You're Never Too Busy. And somebody said, "Oh, staying busy?" And I said, "No, why are you?" And he looked at me like a deer in headlights. And I realized right then, Nathan, that it was a more powerful thing to not be busy than it was to be busy. I realized then that if you're truly successful in life, and I don't mean holy, but I mean more successful, in a secular way, that for me, and I defined my definition of worldly success. I came up with my own definition. My dad always told me to come up with my own definition. He came up with a definition of success, which was, and this is how much I've memorized it, and it's based on Introduction to Devout Life, written by the guy right over your right shoulder, St. Francis de Sales. My dad raised us to say success is fulfillment of the duties of your station in life towards your God, your family, and your work. I got to do it again. Success is the fulfillment of your duties of your station in life towards God, family, work, and community over the course of your lifetime. That's how he defined success. Beautiful. It came right out of Introduction. I found later, I was like, "Dad, you stole that from St. Francis de Sales." He's like, "So what?" He didn't care. So, but for me, I came up with this definition of success. Success for me, Nathan, worldly wise, not virtue wise, is freedom of purpose, meaning I get to work on what I want to work on. Freedom of time, meaning I get to work on whenever I want to work on it. With freedom of relationships, I get to work with the people that I love to work with. And freedom of money, which means I have enough money to be comfortable. So those 4 freedoms. And I got that from one of my business coaches named Dan Sullivan. He has something similar to that. So I started trying to build my life to where I was seeking a certain vision that I have for my life, right? And I articulate my vision on the different tools I have in part 1 of the Welder Family's vision. But I'm very, very intentional about my vision. In fact, this morning, and like, just to show you I'm not BSing you, I'm pulling something out here. This black notebook I started, I was showing an employee this morning at breakfast, January 1st, 2024, right there. And the very first entry was, I'm not going to really show this, but it has lifetime goals, 10-year goals, 3-year goals, 1-year goals. And the categories down the column, the side is spiritual, marriage, parental, physical, financial, professional, recreational. And so this was done 12 months ago. And January 1st of this year, I'll do the same thing again. So I'm just showing you that to really answer your question. I don't consider motivation my thing. I consider vision, and I'm very intentional about what I want to become, what I want in the different areas of my life. I articulate each year what I want 10 years from now, 3 years from now, 1 year from now, that kind of thing, 5 years sometimes. Like, I just pick times, but I'm very intentional about what my vision is for myself in the future in the different areas of my life. And then in order to accomplish that, I remove things to where I'm not busy. I don't consider myself a busy person. When people say, "Oh, you must be so busy," I say, "No, I'm not busy at all," because I am doing what God wants me to do. And if he doesn't want me to do it, I stop doing it. And so that's not really busy. I have a lot of things to do, But busy means I'm preoccupied, or like think of a busy design. It's cluttered. My life is not cluttered. My life is ordered. I might do a lot of things, but it's all in furtherance, Nathan, of that vision that I have for myself. So I don't think in terms of motivation. I think in terms of vision, and I think in terms of structuring my daily life by providing proper support underneath me and removing the nonsense out of the way so that I can accomplish my vision. And then I guess it's just natural motivation, because I want those beautiful things that I've articulated on paper for myself and for my family and for my business. So I don't have to do things to like pump me up. I mean, even like David Goggins, he says, don't listen to music when you work out, because that's artificial motivation. It's art. What if it happens when the battery dies? Are you still going to? So even when I'm working out or something in the morning, I'm trying more to like cut off like the music and things like that, because I don't need to be motivated. I need to have a vision and just slowly and intentionally, consistently build my life to where that vision is accomplished. And I think that's better than quote unquote motivation. Long-winded answer, man. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place, but that's why I like podcasts more than radio shows, so I can run my mouth.
You don't have
longer.
30 seconds.
Sorry, dude. And I'm like showing you all my books. It's weird. I'm like the weirdest guest you've ever had, but
no, it's great.
That's the truth. That's the truth to the answer. I hope that helps a little.
What I pull out of that, and this is something that I share with a lot of people, is it sounds like you have a strong sense of duty. And you even, that word was in your dad's definition, at least, I believe, in success is fulfilling your duties. And I've shared with somebody recently, or maybe it was on the podcast, I can't remember, but the Army has seven Army values, and one of them is duty. And, you have loyalty, integrity, honor. And I said how much these have been lost, especially after seeing Gladiator 2. I feel like it really hit me again. It's just like,
it's cool. It's a cool movie. Yeah.
Yeah. It was good. I think I heard some mixed reviews before I went to see it, but I was like, I definitely think it's worth seeing. It really interesting too, for like this stage in American history of just like returning to like what, it could be, which we could get into a whole tangent on that probably, but just this idea of you have duty, you have integrity, you have honor. We just don't have that as much anymore. And I just shared with this, this person, or wherever I was talking about this, of just, or when I get asked this question about motivation sometimes, is I just feel this duty to like do the things that God asked me to do, and like to give my family a better life than I have, or just to give them the best version of me. And sometimes that means I have to wake up earlier than I want to. Sometimes it means I have to go volunteer and do things in the community that I don't feel like doing. And you just get called to these different things. And I love your explanation of busy. We could probably do a full episode on that together. Your disdain for that is something I certainly share, and I have shared since I was in college, when really seeking excellence, the life of excellence began, where I was just doing a lot of different things and felt like it was my time to really explore, to learn what it meant to be a great man, but also where God was forming me, where God had given me strengths and talents and desires to push further. And people would say that all the time. I have friends who say that now. I have a different men's group than the one that's reading your book that I just participate in. I don't lead. And guys there will say, like, do you think you're the busiest guy in this group? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, every time somebody asks me that, I'm like, I watch more football than I should. I know that. My wife and I, as a family, we watch a lot of NFL, a lot of college football.
I watch a ton. I watched like 3 games yesterday.
Yeah. I play with my dog. I feel like I spend a lot of time playing with my son. I go on date nights with my wife. And so I'm like, I don't know what other people do, is what I often will respond back to that. Is I'm like, yes, I do, go to the gym several times a week, and I, do on a smaller scale than you, but run multiple things and have, a good career and, hobbies and all that stuff.
Do this.
I don't know what people do.
Go to the dictionary. Go to the dictionary on your own later on, and this is in my little book here. But look up the definition of busy, and there's like 3 or 4 depending on the dictionary. But it means cluttered, like a cluttered design. So you have like a busy design. That's not a compliment. That's a negative. Busy means occupied, like a freaking porta-john that walks up and says occupied versus vacant, Yep. It could mean a busy body, which is like somebody who's buttoned in and, like a little social butterfly and gossipy. None of them are flattering notions.
It's the way we describe ourselves.
But it's the way we describe ourselves. Yeah. And we need to stop saying, oh, I'm so busy. It really is fake. And I if you have a lot to do, then say, yeah, I got a lot to get done today. But busy is usually a badge of honor that people are trying. And so I'm trying to get parents to actually just stop saying I'm busy. I'm also trying to get people to stop saying I have a lot of problems. I'd rather them say one. So, some of this is me playing with language, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But language, the words we use changes the thoughts we have and the feelings
words
in our
matter
heart.
for
And
sure.
so, I think that's one thing. Just stop saying I'm busy. I heard it, standing outside of church yesterday, and people say, "Oh, how you doing?" "Oh, just staying busy." And part of me is like, you're not important enough to be that busy. You're not. You're just trying to sound important. So I think these are semantics, but they're really important semantics. It gets to the heart of this modern culture, and especially families. Okay, here's a segue back to the book, right? If I could summarize Welder Family in one thing, it would be that I'm trying to get families to be extraordinarily intentional so that they do less but do it better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the stuff that families get sucked into, you have 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids, 10 kids, it gets insane. And moms and dads, particularly moms, are pulling their hair out, Nathan, and they're losing peace, they're losing joy, they're not representing their faith well to their children. And so the busy subject fits in perfectly well with Welder Family. I'm telling you, it's hard for people to believe, but I have a slower paced life, a more relaxing, peaceful life with 16 children and with 4 businesses that I'm responsible for than the vast majority of people that I know. And they're like, I don't understand that. Well, it's because we have a different vision in our head of what life is all about. So that's why I created Welder Family, is to try to help communicate this to families. And it does start with part 1, vision. And we've already talked about that a little bit, but there you go. There's a segue to the book.
I love it. And I think on top of that too is this, going back to entitled, anxious, the generation we have now. One thing that I see in a lot of my peers is this expectation that we shouldn't have to work very much. And I try to remind people too, that God rested, but he rested on the 7th day, which means he worked for 6, and
Damn right.
and it doesn't mean that we only have to work 40 hours a week, or that when I'm clocking out that like my work for the day is done. Right. I often tell people, like, my work for the day kind of feels like it really ends once my son goes to bed, because that is kind of when we really get to relax. But I just know that from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., like I'm working. And in some capacity. And when I view it that way, then when I have to go change his diaper, or it's time for me to take him and the dog on the walk to give my wife a break, or whatever it is, then I'm just like, that's a part of my work. Now, one of the things
But
I thought was
let me help you. Let me help you slightly improve that, because I've been there a million times. Here's the problem. I'm using the word problem. Here's the problem with that notion. Okay, no offense, but you're a young dad. Let me give you old dad experience here. Okay,
sure.
And it's this, like, when you have more and more kids, then like the work is changing the diapers, taking care of the kid. The work is, getting them out of the house so mom can relax. And then when the baby goes to bed and like you stop being dad, then you get to relax and rejuvenate for a couple hours before you fall asleep. There's a better way, because when you have 10 kids, there's always one awake. You never get you never get them all to sleep. Like, the teenagers stay up later than I do. So I never get all the kids to bed. I never get that. So how do I rest? Like, if there's always a diaper to change, right? Or a paper to grade, or a term paper to help them edit, or grass to tell them to go cut, or dishes to tell them to do. Or last night late, we're talking about what my kid's majoring on in college. My married kid calls me and he's buying a home. And so we're talking about how to structure some of the closing costs and down payment. It never stops. It never stops. And they don't get to go to bed, right? I don't get to put those issues to bed. I don't get to stick a pacifier in the 22-year-old to get stuff talked. So what am I supposed to do? So I have to, Nathan, look at it and see, I love dealing with my children. I'm good at dealing with my children. Therefore, I love doing what I'm good at. I'm good at doing what I love. And so it's not wearing me out. It's not stressful. Okay? It's funny that, like, We look for time to relax, and then we'll go work out and sweat our butts off, right? That's hard work, and it's still relaxing, right? You can go work out really hard, break a sweat, and you're like, oh, I'm so sore. It's great. What is that? I mean, as soon as I get off with you, I'm heading to the Y because I didn't get to do it this morning because I had an early business meeting. And I'm going to go sweat, and then I'm going to get in the sauna and sweat more. And I'm going to say, oh, I'm exhausted. I feel great. So what I'm saying is when you're dealing with that baby and the baby won't stop crying and the baby won't stop pooping and the baby won't stop screaming, what if you could never put them to sleep? How would you relax then? And so you have to start telling yourself, this activity itself is an end in itself. I'm rejuvenating simply internally. I'm rejuvenating because I love being with this kid. I enjoy taking him on a walk. Soothing a screaming baby is one of the most soothing things ever. You have to change it to where you are relaxing because you're doing what you know you're supposed to do. You love doing it. You're fulfilling your duties, and God is blessing you for that. That's the rejuvenation. Don't wait till the kid goes to bed to rejuvenate. Rejuvenate when the kid's screaming his head off. That's when the grace really flows. That's when you're able, if you can tap in and rejuvenate then you have beat the whole system. Because everybody else is waiting till the kids go to bed to learn how to relax. And what I'm saying is learn to relax when the kid's screaming their head off. If you can do that, you've mastered the situation and you're truly free. Otherwise, your kid's controlling you when you get to relax. And when you have 10 kids, they ain't all going to bed. So part of having a peaceful life with a busy family life and a busy work schedule and all these things that we get busy with is learning how to be that prayerful hermit, that monk inside, the hermit, the desert father in your heart, no matter what's going on around you. And you can be perfectly at peace and rejuvenating, even with twins screaming their head off as you hold them both. And I know that because I did it 7 years ago when we had the twins, and you hold both kids and they're screaming their heads off. So again, I felt it's not like I'm preaching, but I guess that's why I'm here. The problem isn't that we don't get enough time alone. The problem is that we do the things that God places before us with the wrong mindset. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's an elevated version of what I was trying to express, which is that we should stop viewing work as bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. Exactly right. That's the way
work
to do
doesn't have to be tiring and exhausting, but it's okay to be on longer than we think that we should be.
But isn't it funny that you work out and that's tiring and exhausting and we love it?
Yeah.
And we want to do it.
I like to break it down. I describe it as kind of like in the world of fitness alone, right? I lived with several track athletes. I was in ROTC and stuff in college. And I was always admiring the fact that my one roommate that I lived with all 4 years was very dedicated to track and cross country. And he had active recovery days, and then there was like pure rest days.
It's nice.
So I always try to describe to people, it's like there's things like working out, there's things like prayer, there's things like reading, there's things like just playing with your kids that are active recovery.
I like
where
that.
It doesn't feel like you're like totally, like bummed out, vegged out, but you're kind of still growing in some capacity, but it is recovery stuff for you.
And by the way, I endorse totally getting the kids. I'm not saying don't put the kids. My wife and I, once you have teenagers, they babysit, and you and your wife get the hell out of Dodge and go, go to dinner. It's wonderful. So, I mean, yeah, of course we want to get away from the kids. It's not like, oh, I want to be with the kids all the time. No, I'm very comfortable saying, no, mom's first. You guys are out of here.
Right.
So, yeah, definitely. But I like that idea of active recover versus passive recovery.
Or just like total rest, where you're like truly taking a total day off from working out.
That's awesome.
You never get that total day, obviously, as a father, but you have those times, even with the teenage kids up, where it's like you're not actively, like you describe in the book, like the toddlers, you like are watching them constantly, and you just have to make sure that they're not, breaking their necks. But trying to enter into some of that other time and expanding your definition of that total rest is really important.
Total rest. Yeah, the rest is internal. Be still and know that I'm God.
Yep.
We have to learn to be still amidst the storm. Mark 4, my other little book called Still Amidst the Storm, somewhere around here. But that whole book is about Jesus is in the boat with the apostles. The storm rages. They're about to capsize. The apostles look at Jesus and say, "Teacher, do you not care if we perish?" And he stands up and says to the wind and storm, "Peace, be still." And then he looks at them and he says, "Have you no faith?" So when the storm is erupting in your life, with the kids screaming, the bills piling up, the wife is stressed out, do you have no faith? Are you going to look at our Lord and say, "Don't you care if I perish?" Of course he does. He wants you to be in that storm for a reason. And so, peace, be still. You can look around and use the same words as Christ and just say, "Peace, be still." Everything around you can stay chaotic internally. You can be as peaceful as you desire to be.
Absolutely. I love it. Going back to the structure of the book, one of the things that really hit me pretty early on, and you refer to it throughout the book, is the way that you and your wife have kind of divvied up roles and responsibilities. You mentioned things like she handles the bills and insurance companies and a lot of those types of things. How did you guys get to the point, and what do you kind of recommend to young married couples as they're discerning like who's going to manage what when it comes to the family life and the household?
Yeah, that's really good. And I wish I had like a really heartfelt answer or something, but the reality is that I'm largely incompetent with like the vast majority of things on this planet, and she's remarkably competent. So keeping those things straight, she just took it on very quickly. Like if somebody has to deal with an insurance policy, early in our marriage, somebody had to deal with paying bills. I think we both knew we would go bankrupt if I was doing it, so she took those on, and I was studying, when we first got married, I'm studying for the bar to get into law school. And so that was like my job. And so she's like, "You go study, I'll pay the bills." And thank Almighty God and my lovely wife that we just kind of kept it that way. She really is like the manager of this household. And because I was always the one working and she was at home, she saw this, paying the bills, dealing with insurance companies, dealing with doctors, dealing with so much stuff. She was just kind of that chief operating officer of everything going on. That created a tremendous amount of freedom for me to be able to go and focus on my career. So I'm just extremely blessed. I don't say that everybody has to do it that way. I do think that financial management and whatnot is teamwork. You can't have secret accounts and crap like that. I see guys trying to kind of do that, and they just like give their wife an allowance. Maybe that works for some people, but I can't imagine doing it. I mean, she knows everything, every penny I have, and everywhere it goes. I mean, she's the one telling me. She's like, "Hey, your paycheck was lower this month. What happened?" I'm like, "It was? I don't know." And I'm like, "Honey, you better contact my accountant at the office and say what happened." And then she's like, so it's funny that I'm able to tell you like every penny and every logistic in my business, and I can't tell you hardly anything for my own personal stuff, my own personal wealth, my own personal household. Like she knows that stuff. I know the stuff at work. It's just the way it's gone with us. But it really started based on not an ideology. It was like out of necessity. She was competent in those areas. I was not. I developed abilities at work, but I think that you have to build around people's strengths. I'm not big into like the traditional roles, so to speak, because by the way, traditional household management, like when a husband was going off to war, who the hell do you think took care of the fields and managed the servants and managed, it was the wife. It was the woman of the house. She like did everything, even Roman women and Greek women. All the slaves reported to her. It wasn't to the dad. He was off doing something else. You know what I mean? So women have largely managed the whole household. That doesn't mean cooking and cleaning. A lot of times, if they were upper class, they didn't ever cook or clean, but they managed like a business out of their household. Plantations, like the women were managing everything. So it's depending on how you look. I'm just saying I've never been somebody that says this is a woman's job, this is a man's job. I don't really think in those terms. It's much more like who's highly competent. Now, do I think that women have a special role to play in having and raising and rearing children at home? Yeah, I think so. I think they're way better at it naturally. And do men need to play a certain role as a spiritual leader of their household? Yeah, absolutely. But the economy's complicated. There's two household incomes all the time. It's just complicated. So I'm not some rad trad that says, oh, men do this and women do that. I don't do that. But I will say that, you are dividing up these tasks. And one way to do it is to say who is highly competent in these areas. And then just like in a business, you want to put people in roles that they're going to thrive because they have a natural propensity to things. And that's what my wife and I have done pretty well. She's got a million perfections and a few imperfections, and I don't have that many perfections. But if you put us into a blender and poured us out, we're a really, really good parent. But alone, we're very imperfect. So, we do kind of match our strengths in different ways. We have different strengths and different weaknesses, but we fit together like a puzzle piece very nicely like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's beautiful to hear. It kind of reminds me of the chapter on unity and talking about getting on the same page. Obviously, you first start with vision. And so what advice do you have for people? We'll come back to the unity piece with that,
Yeah.
but just want to kind of get your thoughts on somebody comes to you, or, they're starting the book. They have no idea what vision, kind of general direction they want their life to be in. You think about
Yeah.
50 years, 30 years, 10 years from now, they have no clue where to start or kind of what to think about. What is kind of the top, the beginning place for them, or advice you have for them for getting clear on that vision?
Well, that's why I created a tool-based system. So everything in Well Ordered Family is based on tools. You download the tools for vision, and it's like I got a tool, which is a worksheet, and it helps you craft your vision statement for your family. Choose your core values, or what I call core virtues. Choose a patron saint for your family. Choose a family beatitude. Choose a family motto. Do a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunity, threats on your family. Come up with 3-year goals. Come up with 10-year goals. I have all of these tools, and then they all go on one sheet called the Family Master Plan. I mean, really, that's the way to start. Like, that's how you start. It starts with this, folks. See what this is? This is called a pencil. And you put it on paper and you fill it out, and something magical happens, Nathan. When you take this pencil and you put it on paper, even neurology has shown it's better even than typing. Now, we've done it to where it's like editable. You can use a PDF version. But there's something magical that happens. The brain works differently when you're trying to take these big picture things and put it on paper. Folks, where you start is with a pencil, and put that pencil on paper. That's why I created tools. Fill them out and you'll discover your vision. It's residing deep within your heart right now. You just don't know what it is. I mean, if you're 30 years old, you spent 30 years developing a vision for your life, and you haven't articulated it yet, but it's in there. It's in there. And my questions and my tools, along with your pencil, is going to pull it out, and it's going to get on paper, and then you and your spouse have something to talk about. That's how it begins.
I love it. Now, let's say that you do that. You go through that. You create a clear vision together. Or sometimes this happens beforehand, basically, where, when it comes to unity, one spouse isn't on board. I've talked with many, through social media, podcasting, speaking, all of that. I've talked with many, both husbands and wives. For the husbands, a lot of times it feels like it happens post-vision. Like the husband has a vision. He's even talked about it with his wife. Maybe when they were dating and engaged, they felt like they were on the same page. Then they get into married life, and a lot of that becomes blurry. A lot of stuff, gets forgotten, and they start to work towards it. And it seems sometimes, or it feels like, the wife is actively working against the vision. On the other hand, I talk to a lot of wives who sometimes will share that, I love all this kind of stuff, or like I desire for my husband to lead, or for us to have a clear vision for our family, but he doesn't seem to care. He seems apathetic, doesn't want to do the exercises, whatever it might be. What advice? And I do think that it's often that way, because I think that the genders are different in that way, where a lot of times it's like the natural, which you kind of talked about there, the spiritual leadership of the husband, which I believe is a task from God. It's the husband is either apathetic and doesn't want to do that part. And so it's usually pre-vision where the wife's frustration lies. And then it's usually post-vision. I think going back to the garden and in the spirit of feminism in our age of, other great books that Tan has published. I've had Carrie Gress on to talk about anti-Mary exposed and talk about that stuff a lot, where maybe the man does, in this age of, toxic masculinity, lacking masculinity, still embrace, and I say toxic masculinity in air quotes because I think there's a lot of problems with that, and I don't believe in that term. But let's say the man, despite this age of crisis of masculinity, still embraces his role, creates division, wants to leave the family, and then you have this kind of Adam and Eve, where the wife is kind of usurping, doesn't want to get on board, doesn't want to work together to create a vision, or again, they work together to create a vision, then executing it, she seems to be an opponent rather than a teammate. What kind of advice do you have for young people finding themselves in either of those situations?
Yeah, do our coaching. This is why I'm not trying to be a commercial here, but I created a model for coaching where I'm not your spiritual director, I'm not your marriage counselor, I'm not your financial planner. I believe that most families have the answers within themselves, and I just have to ask you certain questions, and you have to articulate those on paper and to each other to get on the same page, like, quote, literally the same page, because you use a tool. So we started one-on-one coaching for people, and they can find that on our website, wellerfamily.com. It says free consultation. You do the consultation, and then one of our coaches will try to help you and your spouse get on the same page. It requires, if two spouses are at least interested on getting on the same page, coaching works. If they're not, okay, then I tell spouses all the time, and I give a lot of talks, and like the wife will come up and it says, hey, my husband has no interest in this. He thinks this kind of stuff's silly or whatever. And I said, well, then do it anyway. Like, just proceed. Is he really going to tell you not to do it? Come on, he's probably not. You want to have family meetings with your teenagers? Have family meetings. You want to use these tools and develop a vision? He don't want to participate? Do it anyway. So, I mean, if you were a single mom, could you figure out a vision statement for your family? Yeah. Okay. Could you choose core values? Yeah. Could you choose 3-year goals? Yeah. Could you come up with a scorecard for your family? Yeah. You can do all these things. Could you create a digital policy so your teenagers don't get consumed by technology? Yeah. Well, okay, your husband doesn't want to participate. Do it anyway.
That's awesome.
There you go.
Yeah, just take ownership and execute. That's great. You just hit on a number of these things when you talked about systems. I'd love for you to break down kind of macro and micro systems, the way you describe those as environment and processes, and why you think they're so important to a family having an ordered life.
Yeah, so macro systems for me is the 6 external environments. In the business world, Nathan, there's something called a pestle analysis, which is meant to measure and like articulate the big external factors around a business. And pestle stood for political environments, economic, societal, technological, legal, environmental, something like that. So I created STREP, and so every family deals with STREP. So that's social environments, technological environments, religious and recreational, educational and professional environments. So these are like the big outside forces that your family fits into, and they all connect together. So social is affected by technological, and that's affected by recreational, and so it just all kind of connects together like a big gear. And that all forms what I call an ecosystem. So an ecosystem is many little small environments coming together, connected into one big environment. That's an ecosystem. Your family has an ecosystem. And what I like to tell parents is, are you going to build that ecosystem yourself, or are you going to play victim and pretend like the world built it for you? So you don't like the social environment of your teenagers? Have the guts to change it. You don't like the technological environment of your middle schoolers? Have the guts to change it. You don't like the educational system that your kids are in? Change, move, do something that totally different. Homeschool, send them to a private school. Oh, I don't have the money for that. Okay, well, finances are a big thing. What are you going to do long-term to solve that? Or are you just going to shrug your shoulders and say, oh, well, don't make enough money, so my kids go to the crappy public school and they're going to be brainwashed by woke ideology? I tried. Or are you going to take ownership of this and be what I call the architect? You have to own your family and build the systems that you want your children to be raised in. And so parents, you need to, buck up and build the system. I call it the architect. So that's macro. All right. Now, what about micro? Well, micro is usually what people want to talk about. Like, oh, how do I get the dishes done, the laundry done? Well, first of all, if you came to my house, you'd see that we still don't have a good system for laundry. Laundry is like the hardest thing in the planet for us. It's so hard.
It's just running all the time.
It's ridiculous. Right? And getting
it can't stop.
We got systems in place for it, but it always breaks. It's hard. I mean, you get the older kids to do the laundry for the younger kids. It's on the chore chart. It's scheduled, but it's just getting dishes done and sweeping and vacuuming. It's just easier than laundry. So laundry is a constant battle. But if you have some expert on laundry, let me know, and I'll pay them as a full-time consultant to come in and teach my family how to do it. But so here's the thing. So microsystems are the little things. So like a chore chart. Everybody in the family needs a chore chart. We have that. It runs well. That's how we know who's doing what chores every single day, and it rotates and things like that. A more important example of a microsystem is the digital policy. And on our website, we got the digital policy builder. And that's where I ask you certain questions. I'm not going to tell you what your little kid, how old your kid needs to be before they watch Lord of the Rings and watch a bunch of orcs get their heads cut off. That's not what I'm here for. But I am here to tell you as a parent, you need to ask certain questions. You do need to realize that if you think you don't have a digital policy, then your policy is to entrust your kids to the internet. That's your policy. So that's a terrible policy. Let's improve it. Okay. If you think you don't have a financial system, well, your system is spend money and see what happens. That's a terrible system. So let's improve it. You actually do have a system for everything. You just don't realize it. So once you admit to yourself, yeah, my system stinks, then you're more willing to change it. So I think it's better to say my system stinks than it is to say I don't have a system. That's a cop out. And then you're like putting it off. And so a digital policy, what content do you allow on all the different devices? When do you allow it? With whom can they communicate? And where can they use these things? And so my questionnaire takes you through all of that with precision. And I found, Nathan, that the conflict between parents and middle school and teenagers usually isn't over the fact that the kids just outright broke the rules. It's that there was a lack of clarity exactly what the rule was. And so mom and dad end up having a ton of conflict with the teenager. Because if you give the teenagers an inch, they'll take a mile, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you and I did, right? Probably as a kid. So with technology, mom and dad need really, really precise regulations, and you got to get it on paper. And that's why I have the digital policy builder. Again, it's free online on wellorderfamily.com, but that's what I mean by macro systems. That's the big environment, and micro systems, little processes that make your day run smoother, like the digital policy.
Yeah, I love it. I love the concept of you have systems regardless, right? I thought that was really interesting when you said that. I think I highlighted that part of the book of no matter what, you have some type of system. It's just probably a crappy one. The story about the art, that's right. Yep. About it's not it is art. It's just bad art. You do have a system. It's just a bad system.
You really read the book, man. I'm flattered. It's true. That's a funny story. I love telling that story. So I was in college, and some guy won a big award somewhere. It was in the New York Times or something, and he put a crucifix in a jar of urine, mm-hmm. and he won some award. And I remember saying in class, I said to my professor, "That's not even art." And he said, "Oh no, Conor, it is art. It's just bad art." And that it shocked me. And so I realized, don't sell something short by saying it's not this or that's not that. It's just bad. And sometimes that's the case. So you got systems for everything. They're just bad systems.
Yeah, no, it's powerful. Awesome. Well, I know we only have a few minutes left. The one question I wanted to ask, jumping ahead a little bit, is in discernment. I think a lot of people, I get questions from a lot of guys, especially who are just had one last week. I'll give you an example of a guy on that I met on social media, and he was reaching out to me saying like, "Hey, I'm considering leaving my job. He really loves his job, but he's getting married this summer, and his wife wants to stay home after they have kids. They recognize the reality of having kids right away, as possible. And he's like, I barely make any money, and I know I can't like support my family on this income, but he's working, in youth ministry or something for the church that he really likes. And he was kind of discerning that. I kind of walked him through my process of how I make decisions, but would love to know, or love to hear you kind of break down the discernment process on making some of these bigger decisions. Me and my family are considering moving to a different city and state, one to have more of our values, but also to have lower costs of living, to make it more sustainable living on one income. But yeah, would love to just hear kind of you talk through how you would guide, a young person in making some of those big life decisions.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So there's problem solving and decision making. So problem solving is when you're trying to figure out why does a certain problem continue to appear, right? So that's like a root cause analysis. Why did my teenager keep having attitude whenever I talk about this subject? Why do my wife and I fight whenever we bring up this subject? That's like a problem solving thing. And there's tools in the book to help with that, such as like a root cause analysis. The 80-20 principle is a great tool for problem solving to see like, why does something keep happening? How can I do more of the right things, do less of the bad things? But you're talking more in the example you gave me of decision making. And decision making is when you're choosing between A and B, or maybe A, B, C, and D, right? So let's say in that example you gave, do I stay in my current job at a lower pay rate because I love the place I work and we're near family in our local town and there's so many good things and we love our parish? Or do I, that's option A. And then option B is I'm going to find another job and it might take me into a new town and we got to start all over, but I'll make more money and I can provide for my family. Maybe my spouse won't have to work, or if she does, not as much as she would otherwise. So you're discerning between option A and option B. That's decision making. And I have multiple tools for that. So there's something called, I call it the family decision matrix, and that's a decision matrix. Now, I'm going to tell you real life example of how I did this. What's today? We're recording this on a Monday, and I did this on a Thursday. Last Thursday, I got my 20-year-old who is driving me to the airport. I flew to Texas for something. And so when we're driving there, he was trying to decide between going to St. Joseph the Worker College in Steubenville, which you may have heard about. And he's applying there, and it's like a craft school. And that's option A. And then option B is staying here, continuing at the college that he's at, and getting a job and learning a craft right here in town. That's option B. And so we're talking about it. I said, we need my tool. And I reached in the back seat, grabbed my laptop out, this laptop that's sitting right here, and I pull up the tool and we write down. Now, on that tool, you write down criteria. And it's like the criteria was something like, I want to be around community is important. Well, you have a certain kind of community here in town with your family and local friends. Up there in Steubenville, you'd have a whole nother community, which is pretty amazing too. Work experience, you get certain kind of work experience there in a diverse field, or you can get real specific experience here working on a certain craft full time. Education, you get a certain type of education there, certain type of education here. The finances, it costs a certain amount to live up there. It could be cheaper because he could live at home here or with his grandparents, and he'd save more money, so he can make less money but save more money. Criteria. And every decision you have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 criteria. And then he has to choose how important is each of those criteria to him. Is the money 10? Is the community 10? What's the 10? What's the 5? What's the 7? And then he analyzed option A and option B based on those, and he came up with a total score. And we did that in about 10 minutes on the way to the airport. And I'm typing. I mean, I could really pull it up right now and turn and show it to you right here, which I won't do because it's like his personal stuff.
Yeah, sure.
But it's right here on my computer, just one of these drop down. It's minimized on my screen right here. And it was a way for me to help him be analytical about his decision A or B. So same kind of thing with your friend. Use the tool because, there's great things about staying where he's at and there's great things about changing. And he needs to come up with that criteria with his significant other. And they need to figure out what are the criteria that we're using to make this decision. And then use simple math and you turn it into a number, right? How important is this on a scale of 1 to 10? How important is that on a scale of 1 to 10? and you just force yourself to pick a number, and it's somewhat arbitrary, but they're relative to one another, so they start to take shape, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then you're able to look at each one and say, okay, this is how our hearts and minds are handling this situation. And it really takes it out of the stressful part in your brain and puts it on paper. It makes it more empirical. There's also, real quick, something called a CBA, a cost benefit analysis, another tool that people use. Well, so there's a cost to moving into a new job and moving towns. There's a benefit to that. And so being able to articulate the tangible and the intangible cost and benefits. Tangible benefit, more money. Intangible benefit, new opportunity to meet new friends. Tangible cost, well, it's going to cost us money to get a new house. Intangible cost, we have to put a dollar amount on like leaving our family or leaving the loved ones we have, or what, if I had to put a dollar amount on leaving our parish that we love, what dollar amount do I put on that? So learning to put numbers on things really helps you compare and contrast. That's a cost benefit analysis. So all of these tools are on our website, but it's instead of just talking through this stuff in loops that we do, loop after loop after loop, getting it on paper, Nathan, makes all the difference in the world. And so just telling your friend to go to our website and look and print these suckers out and type them up or use the pencil, it makes a big difference in people's lives. I'm amazed how simple these tools are, but they really help people. And we use them in business all the darn time. But for some reason, our own personal life, we don't do it. And so that's why I created all the tools I have for Well Ordered Family.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love it. I wish I could pull up an old notebook of mine and show you the decision matrix that I made for getting out of the Army when I was analyzing jobs, because it's very, very similar to that. And it's how I've encouraged and taught a lot of people to do it as well. So
awesome.
Amazing. Well, I know our time's up, Conor. It's been great getting to talk with you. I really appreciate you setting aside some time. I know my men's group who listens to Seeking Excellence will be very grateful for it. But yeah, really impactful time for me as well, just getting to learn from you, and grateful that you've written this book, and we'll certainly be checking out some of your other ones that you mentioned here today. So thank you so much for your time.
Man, Nathan, you're doing great. You got a great show, young man, starting your family, got your podcast going, working for Hallow. You're doing everything that, I hope my young sons grow up to be. So keep up the great work. You should be proud of yourself.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening today. Hopefully this was as impactful for you as it was for me. Highly recommend you going to check out Well Ordered Family and Conor's other books at TAN. And then, I always recommend TAN books. So you guys are all familiar with that as well already, but check out tanbooks.com for a great collection of Catholic reading. Thank you so much for listening today. God bless you, and go out there and be your best.